For decades, Soviet combat aircraft have been hidden beneath a veil of secrecy. Mikhail Gorbachev's new policies have changed this. This video ordnance program provides a unique look at the world of Soviet military aviation. The Soviet air forces are organized in a different fashion from most NATO air forces. In fact, there are three distinct air forces. The main air force, called the VVS in Russian, the Air Defense Force, called TDO, and the aviation branch of the Navy, the ABMF. The main air force, the VVS, controls tactical aircraft like the MiG-29 fighter, the Sukhoi 25 ground attack aircraft, combat helicopters like the Mi-28 Havoc, strategic bombers like the Tu-95 Bear, transport aircraft, and others. The Air Defense Forces control strategic defense forces like the new Su-27 Flanker and the MiG-31 Foxhound interceptors and surface-to-air missiles. The Naval Air Force is the smallest branch and includes ship-based helicopters like the Ka-25 Hormone and naval fighters like the Yak-38 Forger. In the Soviet Union, aircraft are named after the head of the design bureau which developed them. For example, the Sukhoi Su-28 is named after Pavel Sukhoi, who headed the bureau until his death in 1975. The name most synonymous with Soviet fighters is MiG. MiG is an abbreviation of the names Mikoyan and Gurevich, the original founders of the MiG Design Bureau. The current head of the MiG Bureau is Rostislav Belyakov. Belyakov joined the Mikoyan Bureau on the eve of World War II during the design of the MiG-3 fighter, eventually rising through the ranks to head the most important Soviet fighter design bureau.
In 1957, I became a deputy chief designer involved in control systems. In 1962, I was appointed the first deputy principal designer, and since that time, I have been participating across the wide range of all operations. In other words, I supervise the work starting with the MiG-25 up to the latest ones, MiG-27, MiG-29, and MiG-31. We haven't shown the MiG-31 yet, but I believe that we will in the future. It serves with the PVO Air Defense Forces.
Soviet aircraft are designed with different priorities from many Western aircraft. This is explained by a noted expert on Soviet aviation, Sergei Sikorsky, son of the legendary Russian-American aircraft pioneer Igor Sikorsky.
Almost invariably, the Soviet aircraft will be slightly heavier than its Western counterpart. Almost invariably, it will have adequate technology, adequate for the job that it is expected to do. It will not be gold-plated. Any technology that is not required for that specific mission and for that specific job will not find a place on that aircraft, simply because of the fact that the aircraft are more designed more for combat, whereas our machines, I dare say, are designed for peacetime use and may eventually see combat. This is born of the Soviets' experiences in World War II, where simple, rugged aircraft were used. It's also part of the Soviet philosophy that says to them that if you use aircraft, use them the way you would use tanks and armored vehicles and people. That is, you throw great masses of them against the enemy, and you make your tactical decisions and you make your victories irregardless of the losses that you suffer. Consequently, you need somewhat cheaper easier to build machines in large quantities.
The MiG-29 Fulcrum is the latest product of the Mikoyan Design Bureau. The MiG-29 was developed in the mid-1970s as a frontal fighter for the Soviet Air Force, replacing the older MiG-23 Flogger. In terms of size and performance, it is most similar to the McDonnell F-18 Hornet strike fighter. It is often compared to the General Dynamics F-16, but the MiG-29 is in fact considerably larger and heavier than the F-16. The MiG-29 is a robust and highly maneuverable fighter, as was amply displayed by demonstrations at the Farnborough Air Show in 1988 and at the Paris Air Show in 1989. The head of the Mikoyan Bureau compares his latest fighter to current NATO designs.
First of all, not one of the other fighters here has the power-to-weight ratio of ours. Secondly, we have a very successful combination of advanced aerodynamic configuration and high thrust, which permits its use in a wide range of flight profiles. Even on takeoff, we have a power-to-weight ratio greater than 1. Not one fighter here, except the Su-27, has such a high ratio. This engine offers a particularly high thrust compared to Western European aircraft. So the power-to-weight ratio on takeoff is greater than 1, a higher level than with other aircraft.
Поэтому если энергоуженность стартовая больше единицы, то там энергоуженность существенно превышает энергоуженность любого самолета.
Secondly, not one Western European or American aircraft has an integrated weapon system like ours. A combination of traditional radar and electro-optical tracker and a helmet sight for target designation. This allows the transfer of information from one sensor to another to provide a firing solution.
От системы к системе, решать и пассивными, и активными методами, решать задачи боевого применения.
I would call this the most important, a combination of a control system with advanced aerodynamic features and a high power-to-weight ratio.
Очень высочайшие характеристики комплекса. Вот эти два главных момента.
The integrated fire controls of the MiG-29 consist of an RP-29 slot-back radar, which is linked to a laser rangefinder and an infrared pointer mounted in front of the cockpit. Unlike radar, the infrared pointer does not emit an electronic signal, which can be detected by an enemy aircraft. All modern fighters have radar warning receivers, which pick up radar emissions and warn the pilot he is being scanned by another aircraft. The MiG-29 fire controls allow the pilot to leave his radar off and sneak up on an opponent unannounced by his radar signal. The infrared pointer picks up the heat given off by the enemy aircraft, such as its engine exhaust. The MiG-29 compares very favorably to Western aircraft like the F-16 or the F-18 Hornet as far as high speed and maneuverability are concerned. One of the more breathtaking maneuvers performed by the MiG test pilots is a hammerhead stall, where the pilot actually allows the fighter to slide backwards for a few moments before regaining speed. These maneuvers are all the more remarkable considering that the current versions of the MiG-29 do not use advanced computerized fly-by-wire flight controls, as on the F-16 or the F-18. The Soviet designers typically use less advanced technologies than on comparable Western designs, but they exploit the older technologies to the fullest extent possible, so that they offer performance comparable to the more advanced technological approaches.
This is our last plane with the usual mechanical control system. All future aircraft produced by our firm will be fitted with fly-by-wire controls. This plane was designed many years ago, and at the time, we didn't have much engineering experience with fly-by-wire. As a result, we used a mechanical control system, but we added automatic features in all the control channels.
The MiG-29 Fulcrum is fitted with an advanced ejection seat, which demonstrated its effectiveness during a freak accident at the 1989 Paris Air Show. The right engine failed when it ingested a bird. Remarkably, the pilot survived without a single broken bone. This slow-motion replay shows the accident in more detail. The engine fails. The pilot tries unsuccessfully to regain control. The rocket-propelled ejection seat clears the aircraft. The drogue chute opens the pilot's main parachute. The pilot is clear of the aircraft crash. The MiG-29 Fulcrum is the most potent fighter with Soviet frontal aviation today. Its impressive performance puts it in the first ranks of today's combat fighters. In contrast to the MiG-29 sophistication, the Sukhoi-25 Frogfoot is a far simpler aircraft. It is designed to operate in the deadly low-altitude environment as a light attack aircraft. In an era where most combat aircraft have been designed around the motto, higher, faster, farther, the Sukhoi-25 was designed around the motto, closer, lower, and quieter. The aircraft we see here is the Su-28 Frogfoot, a combat trainer version of the Su-25 attack aircraft. NATO nicknames the Sukhoi-25 Frogfoot, but to its Russian pilots it's called Grach, after a type of Russian crow.
The Frogfoot, it's a close air support aircraft. It's used for knocking out enemy tanks. It's like a mud fighter. It gets down and fights in support of ground forces, broadly similar to the US Air Force's A-10 tank buster. And its history stems back to the Second World War, when the Soviet Union developed what's called a Sturmovik, which was like a very tough, rugged aircraft to attack ground forces.
The Sukhoi-25 resembles a cross between the European Jaguar and the American A-10. It is smaller and about 50% lighter than the A-10, although they share similar missions. As in the case of the A-10, the Sukhoi-25 is well protected, with a pilot sitting in a bathtub of titanium armor. The armament of the Su-25 includes a twin 30mm cannon in the nose, which can be used to attack light armored vehicles. The wings can carry up to 8 500-kilogram bombs or missiles. The Frogfoot was first employed in combat over Afghanistan in 1980. It was dubbed the German jet by the Mujahideen resistance fighters. It received this unusual name because of the Mujahideen's contempt for the poor accuracy of other Soviet jet bombers. In contrast, the Frogfoot was respected and feared as a very potent attack aircraft. The greatest enemy of the Su-25 Frogfoot in Afghanistan was man-portable missiles, like the American Stinger missile. This aircraft was flown by Colonel Alexander Rutskoy, who was shot down in another Frogfoot by a Stinger in 1985. To counter the Stinger, the Soviets added a flare system to the rear of the aircraft. An infrared guided missile senses the hot exhaust of the aircraft's engines. The flares create false heat images which can confuse the missile as to the real location of the aircraft. Beside the basic ground attack version, there are also trainer versions of the Frogfoot, like the Su-28 General Purpose Trainer. The Su-28 we see here is becoming the standard jet trainer for Soviet jet aviators, replacing the old MiG-17 trainer. It is a stable, dependable aircraft, well suited for training purposes. It is also being used to train the first generation of Soviet carrier aviators for the new Soviet full-deck carrier. It is being used to familiarize Soviet pilots with the difficult skill of arrested deck landings. The larger cousin of the MiG-29 Fulcrum is the Su-27 Flanker. The Su-27 was developed for the Soviet PVO air defense forces for intercepting low-flying bombers. Previous Soviet interceptors, like the MiG-25, had radars which could not track aircraft flying below them at low altitudes. The advent of advanced low-altitude bombers like the American B-1B led the Soviets to develop the Su-27 Flanker as an antidote. The Su-27 has a sophisticated new radar which can pick out low-flying aircraft and attack them with medium-range radar-guided or infrared-guided missiles. The Flanker can also be used in offensive roles, such as an escort fighter.
The Flanker is a long-range escort fighter. It's used to escort Soviet bombers, typically as they would be coming over the North Sea, for instance, to attack the UK. It's demonstrated here at Paris as a very maneuverable aircraft, much more so than we thought, and this is probably due to the fact it's got an advanced fly-by-wire system, which is a computer backup system for the pilot.
The fly-by-wire flight control system in the Flanker is evidence of the sophistication of its design. This is the first major Soviet combat aircraft to incorporate this technology, even though it was employed in American aircraft in the 1970s. The fly-by-wire system enables the aircraft to undertake maneuvers that would have been unthinkable in earlier generations of fighters. Indeed, the Soviets are so confident of the quality of the design that they have suggested the initiation of a new aerobatic competition for military aircraft, which they have offered to host in Moscow. The most incredible example displayed by the Flanker is a maneuver called the Pugachev Cobra, named after the pilot who developed it.
The maneuverability of the Flanker certainly surprised everyone at Paris. It's demonstrated a maneuver that the Soviets have called the Cobra, which involves the aircraft coming forward, tilting very far back, and then hammering down forward again. This, although it looked as if it was just a rather fancy maneuver, actually tactically could be quite useful in slowing the aircraft down in tactical engagements. And this is due, we think, to its fairly advanced fly-by-wire control system, which is a computer backup for the pilot to enable him to carry out such advanced maneuvers.
The nearest counterparts of the flanker are the American F-15 Eagle and the British Tornado. The Su-27 is larger than the F-15, about 22 tons combat loaded compared to 19 tons. Both aircraft have impressive climb and maneuverability, with the F-15's engines offering 21 tons of thrust and the flanker offering 25 tons of thrust. The Soviets developed a special version of the Su-27 called the P-42 to challenge many of the time-to-altitude records set earlier by the F-15. The flanker currently holds 27 of the world's performance records. It is difficult to compare the actual combat capabilities of both aircraft. Dogfights are no longer decided by speed and maneuverability. The quality of radars and missiles is usually decisive. At the moment, the Su-27 can track and engage only one target at a time with its radar-guided R-72 missiles. In contrast, the F-15 can engage multiple targets simultaneously with the new AMRAAM missile. But there are still many mysteries about the Su-27's performance, and many judgments may prove premature. Besides the single-seat Su-27 fighter, there is also a twin-seat Su-27UB trainer version. There have been some questions whether the two-seat Su-27UB might have a combat role.
When the two-seat version of the flanker was first shown, or first seen in the West, some analysts believe that this may be the Soviet Union's answer to the F-15E, which is a multi-role version of the Eagle, both for air-to-air and air-to-ground operations. But talking around with the Soviets and other people, it's a straight familiarization trainer.
The Su-27 is likely to appear in the near future in a new version for carrier operations. The Soviets have been conducting tests with the flanker to permit it to operate from the decks of its new Tbilisi-class carriers. The first of these is expected to enter service in the early 1990s. In this new role, the flanker will serve as a counterpart to the U.S. Navy's F-14 Tomcat carrier fighter. The new Mi-28 Havoc attack helicopter will replace the Mi-24 Hind in the 1990s. The Havoc design stems from Soviet experiences in Afghanistan, especially the heavy losses of helicopters due to ground fire from rifles and machine guns.
Yes, I think that the interest of the Soviet Air Force in Afghanistan began to turn very rapidly from fixed-wing close air support into helicopters. I believe you can see the statistics speak for themselves. They started with about 75% fixed-wing aircraft and about 25% helicopters. By the final phases of the Afghani campaign, the proportions were almost reversed. About 75% of the aircraft and the missions and the sorties were being flown by helicopter. What makes the Havoc different from the Hind, very simply, is the Afghani campaign. What the Soviets did was collect all of the experience gained in Afghanistan and decided that what they needed is a machine that would become a dedicated close air support Sturmovik helicopter, the next generation Sturmovik helicopter. The first thing that they realized was that the machine had to survive small arms fire. So they designed it to be practically untouchable by 7.65 and something like 95% untouchable even by 12.7 by 50 caliber. They then proceeded to develop some very ingenious crew survival techniques so that even in the very, very difficult case that the aircraft would be disabled, the crew would survive.
The Havoc is armed with a 30mm auto cannon under the nose that can fire either high explosive or armor-piercing ammunition. On the wing pylons are rocket launchers for 40 unguided rockets and rails for a further 16 guided AT-6 spiral anti-tank missiles. The AT-6 spiral missiles allow the Havoc to attack tanks from a distance of 3.5 miles away. The missiles are guided by a small antenna in the nose of the aircraft. The potent anti-tank weaponry of the Havoc permits it to support Soviet armored units during mechanized operations.
The new Mi-28 Havoc that was first shown in Paris at Le Bourget impressed most of us very, very much by its dedication, by its size, and by its ruggedness. It is an aircraft that it is designed to go out with Soviet armor and to live and to eat and to sleep with Soviet armor for 3 to 4 to 5 days at a stretch without seeing an airbase, without seeing a sophisticated maintenance facility. The aircraft has been compared to some equivalent machines such as the Apache and the Mangusta. I would rather like to put it into a different category because after all it is 50%, nearly 50% heavier than the Apache, nearly 50% larger than the Apache. It is a very, very interesting example of a dedicated air-to-ground machine with very, very excellent maneuvering and performance characteristics, and certainly a very serious capability in the air-to-air role.
The Soviet Havoc and the American Apache share similar flight performance. The Apache has the advantage of more sophisticated night attack features. But the Havoc is very well suited for its mission of close air support of Soviet ground forces on the modern battlefield. As the veil of secrecy slowly lifts from Soviet aviation, we are beginning to gain a new understanding of Soviet combat aircraft. Soviet aircraft designs are shaped by different priorities from NATO aircraft. Their avionics are often less sophisticated. But there can be no doubt of the superb aerodynamic performance of the Red Falcon.